So I'm here today with Jena LaFlamme. Jena, you are the author of Pleasurable Weight Loss, and you describe yourself as a sexual empowerment and pleasure coach. Can you tell us your story? I'd love to hear how you transitioned from a rather contentious relationship with food and body to one that is so rooted in pleasure.
Yes, Dawn, hi. Happy to be here. And I'll say my story is more average with how it starts. Just a conventional family with mainstream upbringing, and pleasure was not mentioned, but guilt was mentioned. And my mother definitely would say, I feel guilty, I feel guilty, I feel guilty. And also, I noticed in my mother and other women around, they constantly were saying they wanted to lose weight. They wanted to go on a diet or they were too fat. And so I simply absorbed that message. Pleasure is invisible. Guilt is at the forefront. And if you're a woman, you're a girl, you want to lose weight. And I was 12 years old the first time I squeezed my belly fat and said I'm fat. It's not fat in the slightest. I was skinny. I mean, I was a 12-year-old, just, not underweight, but just healthy girl making that shift into puberty when the body's meant to fill out a bit. And from that point on, it was, many years of then fulfilling that prophecy, uh, being unhappy with my body, therefore rejecting it, therefore not listening to it, therefore trying to control it, and so on, which causes all these problems. Thankfully, I eventually found the teachings of pleasure, and it got me on the right track.
How was it for you to begin to actually unwind some of that programming and cultivate this relationship, right? I mean, finding the teachings of pleasure, it's like there's nod to something that I imagine took quite a bit of discovery and growth.
The two teachers that were most formative on that topic were Mama Gina, who was a great queen of pleasure, and Mark David, who has a school about relationship with food. And I remember getting this message from both of them that you could trust your desires, that what you want, what you desire is a good thing. And I was like, wow, well, I want cookies and ice cream. And then I was like, okay, let me try this. Sat still. I said, okay, body, what do you desire? And what came up was rice, fish, and vegetables. I was absolutely shocked. I thought I could not ask my body what it wanted. I had to be the militant, controlling, and a top-down system, which is really a metaphor for patriarchy. The men controlling the women, the mind controlling the body, the humans controlling the earth, the Gaia, the Mother Earth. It's pervasive pattern. But once I actually challenged it, it just fell apart like a house of cards very quickly, actually.
Wow, that's so fantastic. And dance is really important to you. You talk about belly dancing a lot. How did that play a role in this relationship?
Well, I always loved dancing from a young girl. I was taken to ballet, but then it became something I was doing to please my mother or, be a good girl. And then I stopped that at a certain point, but did enjoy little opportunities for dancing. And when I was 20, I moved to the French Caribbean and became exposed to Afro-Caribbean dancing and salsa dancing and found my hips. And I remember walking down going like, whoa, they move like that. And I'd been much more linear yoga, ballet. It's all, you don't like, woo, find your hips like that. And so that I just like, oh, I felt a power in it. I felt this undescribable feeling and I wanted more of it. So from there, I sought out salsa dancing and belly dancing. And when I found belly dancing, I went to a belly dance festival, which is so like me. I'll just jump straight into the deep end and immerse myself in an environment, which I love doing. And I found the moves, they just felt like coming home. Like this was an ancestral, I mean, it is an ancestral dance, I believe, back to the cave days. Women would prepare their bodies for birth with this kind of dance. And it's later, of course, the patriarchy said, oh, that's, it looks sexy for men. But no, guys, it's actually not. It's for us to feel good in our bodies and to understand how our muscles work and to really be in divine ecstasy when you're doing it freely with great music and rhythms. So that became a true passion. Dancing, I would get these dance DVDs. I'm aging myself here. But before streaming, we did DVDs. And I would put them on every day. And it was discipline in that delightful form of the word, where I was being a disciple to my own truth, my own pleasure, my own body. And yes, my body transformed. Also, biking. I discovered that I really liked biking. I lived in New York City, like commuting with a bike. So to get from A to B instead of the subway, let me ride my bike. First, I thought, oh, I could never bike that far. And then I discovered actually I could. And I remember looking in the mirror and being like, wow, okay. And I never accomplished weight loss while trying to lose weight. It was always I'm forgetting about weight loss. I'm enjoying my body. I'm discovering my body. I'm focused on having a good time. And oh, there's a nice byproduct.
Just something that I think is really important for people to understand is that weight loss is a byproduct of being healthy in general, right? Vitality. There are a lot of ways to lose weight that have nothing to do with vitality. What I'd love to hear from you, though, is about the connection between pleasure and vitality, right? Like, I think you and I run in some small circles where, we can get in this echo chamber and it can feel like everyone's talking about it. But when we look at, in broader places, at least with my patient population, I get, what? Like, what does that have to do with that? So help us make that connection. Why is pleasure such an essential part of health and vitality?
Well, let's go straight to one of the ultimate pleasures, orgasm. When I started out teaching about pleasure, I was pretty shy to speak directly about orgasm and sex. I'd be like, no, it's the pleasure of dancing or like sunset. But we get real. The one of the ultimate pleasures is orgasm, which doesn't only mean the orgasmic climax, which we think of like the male ejaculation, like the female version. It also can be undulations and more subtle waves of orgasmic pleasure. And I prefer the term orgasmic versus orgasm,
Mhm.
describing a state rather than a little moment.
Flip.
But yeah, however you approach it, when we're in an orgasmic state, we are in the moment. We are liberated from the past and the future. And we are given this doorway into our true power, our essence, our unlimited, authentic nature. And that's where our vitality, it feels abundant. It feels like a gushing hose. And I love the metaphor of the ocean as for feminine power. The ocean is unlimited. Like your feminine, when you're in your feminine, it's not like you can use it up and it's all run out because it's an ocean. It's boundless. So the vitality, when we can tap into pleasure, then it's refilling our tank. It's cleansing or detoxing negative thought patterns and really just giving a huge boost to our immune system, our hormonal balance, all of these things.
Right. So you describe yourself as a pleasure coach. And, we live in a world where being expressed in this particular way is certainly not made easy, right? You were talking about the patriarchal structures before, the sort of top down, man over earth, rule, rigidity world we live in. And guilt is often referenced more than pleasure. So, how do you help women? How do you support them in owning and later expressing this aspect of herself?
Well, it's important to realize there are forces out there that would prefer women to be subordinate to men. And if you want to subordinate someone, you don't want them to be in their power. So, as I was saying, being in our pleasure, being in our orgasm, that gives us the sense of power, freedom, authenticity. So, the best way to disempower someone is to get them away from their pleasure and their orgasm. And how do you do that? Propaganda and brainwashing that, oh, sexuality is for men's pleasure. Oh, too many orgasms and you're a slut. And that means you're not spiritual. And that means you're not a good mother. And this deeply entrenched, unfortunately, very toxic beliefs that we buy into, and then we internalize and oppress our own selves, our own daughters, our own sisters, unfortunately. So to wake up from that and realize that when we're in our pleasure, we're powerful. And Naomi Wolf in the book Vagina, very life-changing book, she speaks about the biochemistry of this. And she speaks about dopamine being the the ultimate feminist biochemical. And by that, she explains when we have steady levels of dopamine, again, not because we're like popping cocaine, but because our lifestyle, our food choices, and our pleasure choices are drug free, giving us a nice steady flow of dopamine, then we feel more courageous, more creative. We have a natural leadership tendency that comes to the forefront. We, yeah, we're brave, and we don't let others repress us, and we don't throw ourselves under the bus. So what this shows us is that plenty of dopamine gives us leadership, lets us change the world. And when we have access to pleasure, to sexuality, to orgasm, and we can look forward to it, like, oh, tonight, I'm going to get it, whether it's me and my toys and myself or with a partner. And then I can relish in that moment completely guilt free. And then I can enjoy the afterglow. And then I can again look forward to the next time, knowing that it is coming for me. I'm not like hopefully, wistfully waiting, will I one day get it, but confidently knowing that's around the corner in my future, then we can maintain a very steady level of dopamine and we can stay in our power. So I hope that answered your question.
It's so, so well. And I'm so glad that you brought up the book Vagina. It is a book that has absolutely transformed the way that I think about women's medicine. I love how when she talks about when our attention sort of retreats from the pelvic floor, then it does from our, cerebral area as well. And
Mm.
so much of what walks into my clinical door is the apathy, the depression, the anxiety. And that perspective just helped me to get really curious around sexual shame, disconnection. Even something that I say to women all the time is like, stop blaming your hormones if you're bored. More
Mm.
testosterone will not help if the problem is that you are disconnected. Your
Mm.
husband or partner touches you in the same three places in the same order, and you're going through your to-do list, right? Like there's just something about being embodied and expressed. And you were just talking about dopamine, which it drives, it's that motivational piece. And I think that many times we seek food when our dopamine is inadequate. So
Mhm.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this connection between embodiment, being pleasure centered, and how that just naturally changes some of the drive for the cookie, the ice cream, whatever the quick fix
Mhm.
is.
Well, I want to position pleasure and stress as opposites hormonally. Like to lose weight, we want to have a certain hormonal environment where the body feels safe. And the reason we gain weight under stress is because our ancestors have discovered that we're more likely to live if we have a bit of a buffer in times of stress. You imagine in times of famine or difficulty, like having some extra weight was a really great thing. I also learned while pregnant, having extra fat in your thighs feeds the brain, helps develop the brain of the baby. So there are actually many useful, good reasons to be what many people think is overweight, which isn't necessarily overweight at all, just being curvier. Um, so if you're wanting to lose weight, then relaxation is the Shangri-La, is the desired outcome. But of course, you think, well, how can I relax? Because I'm stressed about feeling overweight. So there needs to be some leap of faith and choosing. I'm not going to buy into this stress about my appearance. I'm not going to go down a downward spiral of hating myself, because when we have negative thoughts about ourselves, we can create an internal stress response that triggers cortisol, that triggers insulin, that tells the body to store fat. So now you're just thinking I'm fat and you're actually causing yourself to gain weight. Most people don't realize that the mind has that much power, the story we tell ourselves. So if you could interrupt that thought and say, I'm not listening to you, blah, blah, blah. I want to relax. What's a great way to relax? Pleasure. Of course, orgasm is the queen, orgasmic states. That doesn't necessarily mean touching your genitals and jumping in bed. It can be dance, as we spoke about today. I live in California. There was just this gorgeous weather. I was on a bike and just had the way the breeze and the sun, the warmth, with a bit of coolness, and it was orgasmic. I mean, I wasn't feeling my genitals, but I was just feeling this full body rush of peace and tranquility and enjoyment of life. Having a good laugh with a friend, absorbing yourself in music or arts or some form of learning. I'm a junkie of learning, and it probably gets my dopamine going and has me forget about my problems for that time. So building these things into your life. And I think when it comes to eating, I want you to eat for pleasure as opposed to eating to get away from stress. They could seem like the same thing, but there's a distinction, because when we eat to reduce stress, we're actually numb to pleasure, slightly, as opposed to sensitized. So the point of that is that if we're stressed, we're not meant to be enjoying pleasure. Actually, your body's like, we're stressed because there's a real danger there. Deal with the danger. Don't like la di la. Enjoy yourself. So when there's a real danger that's important, my child is running across the road. I know my toddler. I don't want to be like, oh, there's an ice cream. I I'm dealing with the emergency. But when the emergency is self-created and it's an internal loop of I'm not good enough, I need to lose weight, I need to change my body, I'm unlovable, and so on, then we experience an emergency that's actually not real, that's self-created. And there's an inner deciding that I do believe comes from consciousness, comes from some intellectual understanding of science, of biology, hormones. We say, no, I'm gonna axe that thought. I'm going to choose to put my attention, like a meditation, over here. I'm going to self-regulate. I'm going to get to neutral, and breathing is one of the best ways to do that. I recommend take 10 deep breaths before eating. Sounds like forever. But if you could lose weight just by breathing 10 times, wouldn't that be amazing? It really, when I learned this, I was reading a book about it. I felt like I lost weight by the end of the book just from breathing more. So then when you've done your breathing and you're in a neutral state, then you can eat for pleasure, truly.
Now,
And by that I
oftentimes,
mean tasting,
yeah,
smelling,
mhm,
really feeling the tactile sensations.
yeah. What I observe in people, at least what they describe, is when they eat with the motivation of avoiding stress, there's an assumption that it will feel good. And oftentimes it actually doesn't. It's like the food choices driven from that state either create, fatigue, bloating, or the emotional shame
Mm.
spiral of like, I blew it. And so it's like this blip of relief followed by this swan dive into more stress. And so for you to talk about coming to neutral first and then making this choice, like what I hear is that you actually open the door to pleasure and then step through.
Absolutely. I have a little diagram that I wanted to explain to you here. It's about the cephalic phase digestive response.
Mhm.
And cephalic comes from the Latin root meaning of the head. And it refers to the release of digestive enzymes from foods we enjoy and from pleasurable eating experiences. And this really ties into weight loss. So basically, when you have food, you have the opportunity for pleasure. And you're gonna take the red pill or the blue pill. You're going to really relish it or you're not. And if you don't step up to the plate for the pleasure of whatever it is, the salad, the what did I have just before? Eggs and rice. Um, Honestly, that was not my best moment. I was rushing. And I told my body, I'm so sorry, I have an interview. I just doing a lot. Next meal I'll savor. So I don't do it perfectly every time, but I do notice the difference. So
Thank
if
you
you're
for
not
being
present,
human.
it's like the fastest meal I've had in a long time. So if you and I notice that sometimes actually having a child now, it's like the child is acting up and I'm really saying, please stop. Mommy wants to have her dinner. And sometimes it's a yes and sometimes it's a no. Mothers do have more challenges in these things. I've discovered that. So if you're not present, maybe you're thinking about the taxes or worries or something. If you're stressed out, as we said, if you're feeling guilty, I shouldn't be eating this, then you're not actually going to get the pleasure of whatever it is from an ice cream or a healthy meal. Then, because of the body's genius, the body actually needs the pleasure. This is the really key point that completely convinced me that pleasurable weight loss is the only way. Your body needs pleasure to feel satisfied. So if you eat and you skip the pleasure that is available, your body says, I didn't feel anything. I didn't see anything. I didn't taste anything. And it creates more hormones for appetite. So you eat more. So now you're eating more. So now are you going to take the opportunity for pleasure? If you keep feeling guilty, stressed out, and not present, you will keep eating yourself into a food coma when the body eventually will, okay, stop. I feel sick. And however, if from the very first bite, you took your 10 breaths and you smelled it, tasted it, really enjoyed it, then there's basically a different metabolic pathway in the body. And there's a hormone called cholecystokinin. And it has multiple functions, including the digestion of dietary fat and stimulating pleasure sensors in the brain and letting you know you're full and satisfied. So basically, you're digesting well, you're assimilating, you're having pleasure, and you're feeling full. So that that's basically pleasurable weight loss in a nutshell. If we needed to put it down to a paragraph.
Yeah, absolutely. And you refer to in your book, you talk a lot about savoring food, which is
Yeah,
essentially what you just described.
exactly.
Slowing down the tasting, the smell, the texture, the beauty. Um, and it seems like the approach is not to just savor food, but to savor life, right? Like, so you talked earlier about how this like orgasmic experience is it's a state. It's not about touching your genitals. You referred to being on your bike and enjoying the sunshine and the breeze. And I'm curious if you can connect this
I'll
idea of
say it's not only about touching your genitals. I do highly recommend that as part of one of the methods.
only is critical word. Thank you. Um, but you talk about something called erotic that you refer to as erotic innocence. Right? And
Mhm.
I'm curious if there's a connection between savoring and erotic innocence. So can you tell us what erotic innocence is?
Yeah. Erotic innocence is our body's natural curiosity towards pleasure that we have from childhood. One thing I've noticed with my daughter is she's only 20 months, but for months now she got her hands on some lip gloss, and she'll put the lip gloss on. And I don't even wear lipstick or lip gloss that often, but sometimes have some on now. So it's not like she saw me doing it all the time or anything, but she was just obsessed with it. And I was like, why does she love it so much? And then I took it from her hand and I put it on. And I was like, oh, that feels amazing. I never really noticed that applying lip gloss feels so good. I thought, okay, it looks good, but actually it's extremely sensual if you're really present with it. So yes, we have this from birth, this curiosity towards pleasure through all the senses. And what makes the erotic innocence innocent is that it's prior to guilt and shame. So before the mind has time to jump in and say, "Ooh, that's shameful," which for her toddler brain doesn't even exist yet at all. It's a childlike state of freedom from guilt and shame. And we associate innocence with children, but we can have innocence within ourselves, even as adults, even if we have been violated in the past and seemingly lost our innocence, which I experienced, and most of us do in some way. And the way usually we perceive that the mind decides if something is good or bad first, but actually the body is deciding first, and then the mind jumps on and tries to pretend that its opinion is the right one. So this is where meditation is really helpful, learning to arrest the thought, so to speak, or put them to the side, so that when you go for that ice cream, like, oh my God, that's so good. And the mind's like, yes, but how much sugar is in there? And what about diabetes? You are able to just say, shh, let me enjoy this ice cream now. So when we're eating, if we can learn to put the mind to the side, put the judgments of the mind to the side. Oh, my mother's voice, she always said you ate too much. Whatever it may be. Um, I had a partner once that didn't last that long who was telling me I ate too much, and I was just like absolutely outraged that this the man. I already even had my book deal for Pleasurable Weight Loss. I was just like, how could you say that to a grown up? Like it's awful. But we have these internalized voices and sometimes externalized. So just basically erotic innocence is very private. It's very personal. It's between you and you. It's your authentic authority with your body. What feels good to her? Some people think being spanked feels good. It's an impact play, they call it. It's a pain that feels pleasurable. Everyone has their own moment, whatever that moment may be. And so erotic comes from eros, which is about the pulse of life. Again, it's not only a genital sexual thing. The bike ride was an erotic moment. A sunset can be an erotic moment, a bath. And so we're moving away from, like, the opposite would be erotic shame, erotic guilt. And how can you like truly lose yourself in a meal if your mind is telling you that's wrong or bad or selfish? So we're distinguishing those and really making a safe space, being a sort of bodyguard for those natural impulses for pleasure.
Absolutely. And something that Mark David talked about, right, which is, where you and I met was in his eating psychology training. But he talks about really like unweaving morality and food, and you just said it's the mind that comes in and says it's good or bad, but the body often says something very different. And you talk in your book about knowing your female animal, being led by this place. Can you talk to us about what that means and what it's like to live from that knowing?
Yeah, and I'll just say on the good and bad, you can replace it with helpful or unhelpful.
Yeah, I like effective, ineffective, right? When working with people. Is it,
Yeah.
but yes, really similar. Helpful
Or
and
actually not helpful. I wanted to say was useful. Useful or unuseful.
right.
And maybe in this moment, this ice cream is seems unuseful for my weight loss plan, but it's so useful because it's a hot day and I'm feeling better and it's a social moment and I'm relishing my freedom to be alive with this delicious ice cream now. And that felt really useful.
And that language really preserves the innocence, doesn't it? Like we
Yes.
just don't come in with shame and guilt. And then we do get to stay in touch with the delight.
Mhm.
So thank you for that.
Welcome. So yeah, the animal body really comes back to this original, the idea at the beginning of, are we, is the mind in charge of the body, or does the body have its own intelligence? And actually, the body does have its own intelligence. I was very much raised with the intellect, be smart, math, science, language, everything you're thinking. And obviously, I love that. I wrote a book and I do love thinking. But what about preserving the dignity of our animal body? That is brilliant. We slip on a staircase and we catch the railing and save ourselves from falling. That was not the mind. We cut ourselves. The scab heals it. It's not the mind. We grow a baby. We birth a baby. It's not the mind. And I did a little research. I don't have the list in front of me, but I just came up with like 20 amazing things along those lines that we can attribute to the intelligence of the body. And they're so taken for granted. So when you connect with your body as an animal, she becomes a person, like an entity, and for women, a female. So it becomes you, the mind, and her, the body, in a relationship. So the norm, the standard narrative is the mind controls the body, but in the pleasurable weight loss approach, they're partners, they're equals. And okay, you want to do your crossword puzzle and read a book? Great. Mind, you get to your play. Also make space for the play of the body, for the pleasure of the body. Because if you don't, basically weight gain is your body's cry for attention. I was saying weight gain is a protection, and it's also a way of saying, hey, I tried to get your attention with some tiredness. I tried to get your attention with 10 pounds of weight gain. Now I'm at 50 pounds. When are you going to get the message? Hi, I'm here. I have needs. I need pleasure. I need good times. I need respect.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you start to listen and really respect the body, follow the vitality, she wants to be light and agile. And that doesn't necessarily mean skinny whatsoever, but free and happy.
A beautiful concept. And we see it in so many aspects of health where what we think of as symptoms, right, are really just the body trying to communicate, asking for help and support, so it's a really wonderful paradigm. I'm really curious
Well,
because
we call it a sacred symptom, right?
yes, absolutely.
It's guiding us. The pain, the symptom is guiding us on a mission that we must pursue.
And so then you mentioned your daughter. She's 20 months.
Yes. Yes.
How has the journey of being pregnant, giving birth, and then evolving as a mother, like to what extent has that shifted your perspectives on any of these conversations?
Hmm. Well, as soon as I was pregnant, I felt a personality shift. And I was like, wow, hormones, they really do influence us. Like, it's incredible. Like progesterone, I think was the first one I really noticed the effect and of nesting and cleaning and organizing. And I'm like, wasn't like this before. Like it was like a almost a 180 personality shift.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, well, I'm on a ride here of surrender and to now it's not only me in charge here. It's not only my ego in charge. There's another life here. And then I tried to have an orgasmic birth, and I did a wonderful preparation of 10 sensual massages from a woman, um, in a like a therapeutic ambiance, so to speak,
Yeah.
where I was the recipient and I was the goddess, the beautiful pregnant goddess receiving this pleasure and orgasmic waves, not like orgasmic climaxes, but just like deep, blissful, elevated states, and the baby would be moving around and it would be really cool. So I absolutely am so glad I did that preparation, even if the orgasmic birth didn't come to be as desired. But I'm hopefully going to go for number two and then achieve that then. And then, I mean, motherhood definitely is a lot of sacrifice and putting yourself in service. And I can see how mothers can easily lose themselves when I mean, they're needed. Like the baby needs you. And unless you have another parent or family members or paid help, um, there are times when we are exhausted and we don't get to prioritize our pleasure the way we want to. So it's definitely a work in progress. I'm at the point of wanting to get some childcare help so I can have more freedom to do things, including my work. And I mean, breastfeeding is phenomenal. The the mother-child relationship. I was away from her for a few days, actually. My husband kindly gave me some time off to go to celebration. And because I'm still breastfeeding, I had to pump and keep the milk flowing. And I felt weird being away from her. I almost questioned, like, should I be away from her right now? And I'm looking forward to going home to be in my dyad with my baby. And I presume when I stop breastfeeding, that will feel less intense.
Maybe. You know,
Maybe.
maybe.
I
In
don't
a
know my
moment,
authority.
right? Yeah.
I was gonna say I'm so fresh into it at 20 months. I don't know if I have any pearls of wisdom for you there, Dawn. Just definitely in it, and
Yeah. Did it
like
shift your relationship to your body?
um
It sounds like you had done so much of that deep work prior that I could see that
yeah,
maybe you hadn't, but I was just wondering that experience of making a human, having life inside of you, did it change that perspective?
it just emphasizes the miracle of it all. I actually ended up with a cesarean section, which was I so didn't want that, and my midwife had like no cesareans, and it hurt that like hundreds of births, and I was like not gonna happen to me, and sadly did, and so it's actually still a process. I feel some misgivings about this surgical incision and the healing of that area, even
Yeah.
almost 2 years later.
Mm,
So I feel like I'm still recovering from that.
yeah. Thank you for being honest about that. It is a process, and I think that in so many ways, whether it's because we have an illness or because we have weight gain or, something happens different than the plan, we can often almost feel betrayed by the
Yeah.
body. And it is truly a healing journey in many ways. And so I just commend you for making space for it. I know that you had a photo shoot recently.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, what was it like to have images? What is that process like? I have found that for myself to have photos, they anchor something. I'm just curious what that experience was like for you now.
It was fun. Actually, something's coming to mind that was during the pregnancy where I'd had difficulties getting pregnant. I was in my 40s. Um, I'm going to say foolishly delayed and brought infertility issues upon myself that I wouldn't have had earlier in life. That was my own journey of not being ready in time to, then require medical interventions. But I like getting pregnant was a drag and I wasn't feeling like myself. And then at some point in the pregnancy, I felt myself come back. And I remember looking in the mirror and being like, ah, there you are. And I did have a deep coming back to myself and my power during the pregnancy, and did have a lot of fun doing photo shoots during pregnancy. And I do always love to put on a dress and really have the presence to communicate my light through a camera, to an eventual other person on the other side, and offer my spirit as a gift.
It's so great. Jen, I am such a fan of your work. I have been for a long time, and I'm really grateful for everything that you've shared with us today. As I kind of bring us back to that central theme that you just cannot hate yourself into health and happiness, right? I feel like everything that we've talked about is essentially that, but is there anything else that you want to say? Like if I just asked the right question, you would have brought it up, or something that you want to leave the viewers with around that idea?
The closing thought I'd like to share is how deeply ingrained it is that we should feel guilty about enjoying our bodies. And I do think that's one of the main reasons that women struggle with weight loss is, or with weight gain, however you want to say it, is because if we're feeling slim and fit and healthy and vital, and we're just obviously enjoying ourselves and we're getting nice desired attention and just the flow and the opportunities and everything's great, we are trained to feel that that's not okay. We shouldn't really be enjoying our bodies. We shouldn't really be in love with ourselves. We shouldn't really be in love with our lives. Like, that's not really allowed. And it's a somewhat invisible conditioning that you may pick up even from your loved ones. Like, oh, really? You're going to get another massage? Or, oh, you're making time for yourself again? Oh, aren't you too big for your boots? Like that expression, you're too big for your boots, I believe is why we have a weight gain epidemic. Because yeah, hell yeah, I'm feeling awesome in my boots. Thank you very much. Like that's the stance. And it can be tiring to constantly be like, why are you putting me down for feeling good? So just to be aware that there are so many forces that are going to try to repress you from feeling good, and that it's your personal sacred activism to say, feeling good is sacred, pleasure is sacred, living with pleasure, living in pleasure, loving my body, enjoying my body, having a body that's just like, yeah, I want the juicy or whatever size or shape you are. That can be another thing. Oh, you think you can enjoy your body when you look like that? Yes, I can. I can enjoy my cellulite and my stretch marks and all of it. And I'm even learning to enjoy my cesarean scar. So yeah, keep that remembrance and be your own best advocate when it comes to pleasure. Of course, offer that to sisters, offer that to others, but don't let others take you down.
Thank you. What beautiful words to end on. So grateful to have you and your thoughts today. Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you, Dawn. Pleasure. I'm very proud of you for doing this great topic in your summit.